All right, guys, today we're going to work on multiplying radical terms. I know the title says dividing and rationalizing, but we're just going to work on multiplying today. So for this first example, when we're multiplying root 3 times root 2, you just simply multiply those together and you get root 6. And root 6 is not a perfect square, so this is actually our final answer. Okay, for the next one, we're going to multiply the 5 times the 7 and then the x as well. So 5x times 7, that would be root 35x. And that also cannot be further simplified because its factors are 5 times 7, and neither one of those are perfect squares. So letter C, you're going to multiply the 5x and the 10x. So on this one, I like to just do the whole numbers separate from the variables. So you have the 5 times 10, that's 50, so root 50. And then root x times root x is going to be root x squared. So this can be simplified. So root 50 can be broken up into root 25 times root 2. The square root of 25 is 5, and then the root 2 cannot be simplified. And then x squared can just be simplified to x. So for this one, remember, we take anything that's not under the radical and we bring it to the front. So that's going to be 5x root 2 for your final answer. Okay, for letter D, I'm going to do this one different than I'm going to do for letter E, but it could be done a couple different ways. So before I start multiplying anything together, as far as my whole numbers are concerned, I'm just going to rewrite my whole numbers first. So root 8 times root 12. And then in this next step, I can multiply the variables. So that would be root x squared. And then your y's would be root y squared. So as I'm looking at this, I could multiply root 8 by root 12 and get root 96 and then simplify root 96. But these are pretty simple roots to simplify already. So the square root of 8, that would be 4 times 2, which would simplify to 2 root 2. And then 12 would be 4 times 3, so that would simplify to 2 root 3. Then the x squared just simplifies to x, and the y squared simplifies to y. So now we take anything that's not under the radical and bring it to the front. So we have 2 times 2 is 4. We have the x and the y, and then we have a root 2 and a root 3, both under the radical. So 2 and a 3, both under the radical, you're going to multiply those together, and that would give you root 6. So 4xy root 6 is going to be your final answer. Okay, so this next one, instead of simplifying the square root of 20 and the square root of 30 in the first step, I'm just going to multiply those two things together. So root 20 times root 30, that's going to give me the square root of 600. And then we have the root x and the root x. So x times x is going to give me x squared. And then y cubed and a y to the 5th. That's going to give me y to the 8th. So one thing you want to remember here is that you're going to be adding the exponents, not multiplying them, okay? So now we're going to simplify this 600. So one way to do that is to do 100, the square root of 100 times the square root of 6. The square root of 100 is 10. So you have 10 root 6. And then the square root of x squared is just x. And then the square root of y to the 8th. So remember, when you have an even number, you can divide by 2. So that would be y to the 4th. So now you just take everything that's not under the radical and bring it to the front. So that would be 10. Let me switch back to the pen, sorry. 10xy to the 4th. And then under the radical, you have a 6. So radical 6. That would be your final answer. Okay, let's do this next one. So multiplying these whole numbers together, that would be 6 times 15 is 90. And then multiply your x's. So x to the 1 and x to the 4th would be x to the 5th. Then we do the y. So we have y squared and y to the 6th. That would be y to the 8th. And lastly, we have m to the 3rd and m to the 9th. So 9 plus 3 is 12. So this one would be m to the 12th. So when you're rewriting them, you could rewrite all of that under a huge radical sign, but I'm not doing that because I know I'm going to separate it anyway, so I'm just separating it initially. So the square root of 90 would be 10 times 9, and 10 times 9, 9 is a perfect square, so that would be 3 root 10. The x to the 5th, you want to break this up into an even number. So we're going to break this up into the square root of x to the 4th times the square root of x. Okay, so when we do that, we can divide this one by 2. So that's x squared, and this x stays under the radical. Divide this one by 2, and you get y to the 4th. And then divide m to the 12th by 2, you get m to the 6th. So now that everything's simplified, anything that does not have a radical symbol will come to the front. I like to do mine in ABC order. So you have 3, sorry about that, you have 3 m to the 6th, x squared, y to the 4th, and the two things left under the radical are 10x. So this would be your final answer here. Okay, these next examples get a little bit more difficult because now notice there's a coefficient in front of each radical symbol, but we're still going to do them the same way we did the ones on the previous slide. So you're going to multiply the 3 and the 5. That's 3 times 5 is 15. And then now I'm going to do the 6 times the 14. So 6 times 14, that's going to be root 84. And then x to the 5th and x, that's going to be x to the 6th. So I don't really know, to be honest, what perfect squares go into 84 off the top of my head. So I'm just going to do a factor tree real fast to help me out. So I know 84, that one is an even number. So I can do 2 times 42. This is a prime number. 42 would give me 6 times 7. 7 is a prime number. And then the 6 would be 2 times 3. And 2 and 3 are prime numbers. So remember, when we're doing it this way, we're looking for pairs of numbers. So I have a pair right here. Okay? So the 15 would stay where it is. This pair would come out in front. And then the 7 and the 3 would just stay underneath the radical. So that would be 21. And then the x to the 6th, you divide that one by 2, and you would get x cubed. So now we're just going to multiply anything that does not have a radical symbol. So 5 times 2 is 30, and then the x cubed. So we have 30 x cubed, and then the square root of 21 is left. So this would be your final answer. For letter B, we're going to multiply the whole numbers in front. So negative 2 times 3 is negative 6. Then I'm going to take the 20 times the 15. So 20 times 15, that's going to be 300. So times the square root of 300. And then you're going to multiply the x squared by the x squared. So remember, you're adding the exponent. That's going to be x to the 4th. So nothing happens with the negative 6, but we can simplify the 300 into 100 times 3. So the square root of 100 is 10, and the root 3 stays under the radical. And then x to the 4th, divide that by 2 to get x squared. Now we're going to multiply anything that does not have a radical symbol. So negative 6 times 10 is negative 60. The x squared will come after. And then you have root 3 next for negative 60x squared root 3 for your final answer. So I encourage you guys to pause the video, try the you try ones A and B on your own. And then once you have worked through them yourself, or even if you get stuck, unpause the video and follow me as I go through the examples with you. Okay, so for letter A, we're going to multiply the whole numbers. So we have 5 times negative 4, that's negative 20. And then I'm going to multiply the whole numbers that are under the radical. So we have 3 times 6, that is going to be the square root of 18. Next I'm going to do the x's, so x to the 5th and x, add those exponents. So x to the 5th and just x is going to be x to the 6th. Then we have a y squared and a y cubed. So 3 plus 2, that's going to give me y to the 5th. And then your last one that we have here is m and m. That one's going to give me m squared. So now I'm just going to take each one of these and simplify them if I can. So the negative 20, that doesn't simplify. The square root of 18 is the square root of 9 times the square root of 2. So this would be 3 root 2. So that's what I'm going to bring down as the simplified version. So 3 root 2. The x to the 6, divide that by 2. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. So that one's x cubed. And then you want to rewrite the y to the 5th as an even, with an even exponent. So this is going to be the square root of y to the 4th times the square root of y. So that would give me y squared root y. And then this one will just be m. So now we just multiply everything that's not in the radicals. So we have negative 20 times 3 times x cubed times y squared times m. As you know, I like to write mine in ABC order. So this is going to be negative 60 m x cubed y squared. And underneath the radical, I had a 2 and a y left. So this would be your final answer. Last one, we're going to be multiplying the numbers outside. So this one's a little bit tricky because we have a negative sign right there. So that acts like a negative 1. So 3 times negative 1 would be negative 3. Then we're going to multiply the whole numbers under the radical. So 8 times 16, that is the square root of 128. And then the x's go next. So x and x to the 5th, that's going to be x to the 6th. So again, I don't know what the square root of 128 is, or if it even has any perfect squares within it, and it's not on my cheat sheet. So I'm just going to do it the old school way and see what happens. So I know 128 is an even number, so I know that that would be the square root of 2 times the square root of 64. And that just made it really easy because the square root of 64 is a perfect square. So this would be 8 root 2. Then we can bring down the 3 and then divide this one by 2. So x to the 6, you divide that by 2, you get x cubed. And now we're going to multiply anything that does not have a radical. So negative 3 times 8 is negative 24. We have that x cubed out there. And then the root 2 was the only thing left under the radical. So your answer is negative 24 x cubed root 2. So for the homework that follows this, I don't need you guys to do the whole page. You can just do the odd problems if you'd like, submit them. And if you work it out on lined paper, please make sure your answers are clear, boxed, highlighted, or circled so I can quickly see your answers and make corrections if needed.